If you could step back in time exactly 66 million years, you wouldn't recognize the Earth beneath your feet. There would be no highways stretching across continents, no cities glowing beneath the night sky, no airplanes carving white lines through the clouds, no human voices, no engines, no concrete, no monuments. Instead, you would find yourself standing on a planet that seemed almost untouched, a world where nature ruled every horizon, every ocean, and every breath of air. This was the late Cretaceous period, the final chapter of the Age of Dinosaurs. For more than 160 million years, dinosaurs had dominated life on Earth. To put that into perspective, they had ruled this planet for over 100 times longer than humans have existed. Entire mountain ranges had risen and eroded during their reign. Oceans had advanced and retreated. Continents had slowly drifted toward the positions we recognize today. To the creatures living then, this world must have felt eternal. The forests were unlike anything we know today. Towering conifers stretched toward the sky, while flowering plants, still relatively new in Earth's history, spread vibrant colors across the landscape. Ferns carpeted the forest floor, thriving in the warm, humid climate that covered much of the planet. The air itself carried a different scent, rich with damp vegetation, volcanic minerals, and the unmistakable fragrance of a world bursting with life. Then came the sounds. Imagine standing at sunrise. Instead of the songs of sparrows or robins, the dawn chorus belonged to ancient birds, insects, and creatures whose descendants still survive today. The forests echoed with the distant calls of colossal dinosaurs communicating across valleys. Giant pterosaurs glided overhead, their wings casting enormous shadows over rivers teeming with fish and crocodilian predators. Every direction offered movement. Every sound spoke of life. On the plains, enormous herds of plant-eating dinosaurs moved together, stripping vegetation as they wandered across the landscape. Some weighed more than modern elephants. Others stood as tall as a two-story house. Yet even these giants lived cautiously because they shared their world with hunters. Hidden among the trees, predators waited patiently. They didn't hunt out of cruelty. They hunted because every living thing was part of an ancient balance that had existed for millions of years. Nothing in nature was wasted. A fallen giant fed scavengers. Scavengers fed insects. Insects nourished the soil. From that soil grew new forests, and those forests fed the next generation of giants. Life was connected by countless invisible threads. Beyond the forests, another kingdom stretched across the oceans. The seas were alive with creatures every bit as extraordinary as those on land. Massive marine reptiles patrolled the ancient waters. Giant turtles drifted through warm currents. Sharks hunted beneath the waves, while ammonites, spiral-shelled relatives of today's squid and octopus, floated in unimaginable numbers. Above the oceans, pterosaurs with wingspans wider than a small airplane soared effortlessly on rising air currents, searching for fish near the surface. From the highest skies to the deepest seas, Earth pulsed with life. And perhaps that is what makes this moment so remarkable. There was no obvious sign that anything was wrong. No earthquakes shook the continents. No volcanoes darkened the skies. No strange diseases swept through the forests. If you had lived during those final days, you would have gone about your life exactly as you had the day before. A mother dinosaur guarded her nest, unaware that her hatchlings would never reach adulthood. A young predator stalked its first prey, never knowing it was hunting during the final chapter of its species' story. Ancient birds gathered food for their chicks. Flowers opened beneath the morning sun. Rivers flowed. The tides rose and fell. The earth appeared calm, stable, unchanging. But history has a cruel habit of changing without asking permission. While every living creature continued its ordinary day, something extraordinary had already begun. Far beyond the blue sky, far beyond the moon, beyond the reach of anything these ancient animals could ever imagine, a mountain-sized object was hurtling silently through the darkness of space. It carried no warning, no sound, no light bright enough to catch the attention of anything below. For millions of years, it had wandered the solar system, following the unbreakable laws of gravity. Every second brought it closer to a destination it had not chosen, yet could no longer avoid. The dinosaurs did not know it was coming. The forests did not know. The oceans did not know. Life continued as though tomorrow was guaranteed. It wasn't. Because somewhere in the vast emptiness above Earth, destiny was already falling. And within hours, a single impact would erase nearly 3/4 of all species on the planet. It would end the reign of the dinosaurs. It would transform Earth's climate in ways no living creature had ever experienced. And strangely enough, it would also create the conditions that would one day allow human beings to exist. But before the silence came, the sky itself had to catch fire. Somewhere between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, millions of rocky bodies circle the sun in what astronomers call the asteroid belt. Most have followed stable paths for billions of years, quietly orbiting without ever threatening Earth. But every so often, gravity rewrites the story. A close encounter with another asteroid, a subtle gravitational tug from Jupiter, a tiny change in direction that seems insignificant at first, yet grows larger over millions of years. Scientists believe this is how Earth's greatest visitor began its final journey. It wasn't aiming for our planet. It wasn't driven by intention. It was simply obeying the laws of physics. Long before the dinosaurs ever walked the Earth, before flowering plants spread across the continents, before the Atlantic Ocean reached its present form, this enormous rock had already begun a journey that would one day reshape life forever. By the time it approached Earth, it measured roughly 10 kilometers, or about 6 miles across. That may not sound enormous compared to the size of a planet, but appearances can be deceiving. Imagine placing Mount Everest on its side and launching it through space at extraordinary speed. That's the scale of what Earth was about to face. The asteroid was traveling at around 20 kilometers every second, more than 70,000 kilometers per hour, or over 43,000 miles per hour. At that speed, there would be no time to react. Not that anyone could have. 66 million years ago, no creature possessed telescopes. No civilization scanned the heavens. The sky was simply part of the landscape. As dawn broke over the ancient world, the asteroid entered Earth's atmosphere. Within seconds, the air around it compressed so violently that temperatures soared to thousands of degrees. The object didn't gently fall from the sky. It became a blazing fireball. For anyone looking upward in those final moments, it would have appeared brighter than the sun itself, a streak of white fire growing larger with terrifying speed. Then, impact. The asteroid slammed into a shallow sea near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in present-day Mexico. In less than a heartbeat, the surface of the Earth exploded. Solid rock behaved like liquid. The crust buckled under unimaginable force. A crater nearly 200 kilometers, or 120 miles wide, began to form. Today, scientists know it as the Chicxulub crater, one of the most important geological discoveries ever made. The energy released is almost beyond comprehension. It has been estimated at more than 100 trillion tons of TNT, millions of times more powerful than the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated by humans. The ground near the impact site didn't merely shake, it vaporized. Mountains of rock were blasted into the atmosphere. Molten debris was hurled thousands of kilometers in every direction. Within minutes, Earthquakes rippled across the planet with a force no human civilization has ever witnessed. Some scientists estimate that these quakes exceeded magnitude 11, far beyond anything recorded in modern history. Across nearby coastlines, the oceans responded with terrifying violence. Walls of water, tsunamis hundreds of meters high, surged across ancient seas, tearing through coastlines and carrying forests, sediments, and entire ecosystems into the deep. But the destruction wasn't confined to the impact zone. Pieces of molten rock, ejected high above the atmosphere, eventually began falling back to Earth. Not one or two, billions. As they re-entered the atmosphere, they heated the air around them like countless meteorites, turning the sky into a furnace. For a time, much of the planet may have experienced temperatures hot enough to ignite dry vegetation across entire continents. Forests burned, grasslands erupted into flames. Smoke joined dust in the atmosphere. Even regions thousands of kilometers from the impact felt the consequences. It must have seemed as though the sky itself had declared war on the earth below. For the animals that survived the first hours, there was no understanding of what had happened. A herd separated by fire searched for one another. Predators fled instead of hunting. Birds scattered into smoke-filled skies. Marine creatures struggled as giant waves churned the oceans. The familiar rhythms of life disappeared in a single day. If you had stood on Earth then, you might have believed this was the end. How could anything survive such unimaginable destruction? Yet here is one of the greatest surprises in Earth's history. As catastrophic as the impact was, as devastating as the earthquakes became, as immense as the tsunamis were, they were not what ultimately wiped out most of life on Earth. The asteroid had delivered the first blow. The deadliest chapter was still to come, because high above the burning forests and collapsing coastlines, billions of tons of dust, ash, soot, and vaporized rock were climbing ever higher into the atmosphere. Soon, they would spread around the globe. Soon, the sunlight that had warmed Earth for hundreds of millions of years would begin to disappear. The fires would eventually burn out. The waves would eventually retreat. The ground would eventually stop shaking. But what was coming next would last for years. And it would silence the planet in a way no explosion ever could. When we imagine the extinction of the dinosaurs, we often picture a single catastrophic moment. A giant asteroid striking Earth and wiping out life in an instant. But that's not what happened. The asteroid changed the world in a matter of seconds. The extinction unfolded over months and years. For the creatures that survived the impact, the worst was only beginning. High above the planet, billions of tons of pulverized rock, ash, sulfur, and soot continued to spread through the atmosphere. Powerful winds carried this blanket of debris around the globe, wrapping the Earth in a veil unlike anything it had experienced before. Then, something extraordinary happened. The sun began to disappear. At first, the change was subtle. The days looked dimmer. Sunrises lost their brilliance. Sunsets turned strange shades of red and orange as sunlight struggled to penetrate the thickening atmosphere. But the darkness deepened. Week after week, less sunlight reached the Earth's surface. Imagine waking each morning expecting daylight, only to find a sky that never fully brightened. A world trapped in permanent twilight. For the dinosaurs, darkness wasn't just frightening, it was fatal. Because every food chain on Earth depended on one simple process: photosynthesis. Plants use sunlight to turn water and carbon dioxide into food, releasing oxygen in the process. It is one of the most important biological processes on Earth, forming the foundation of nearly every ecosystem. Without sunlight, photosynthesis slowed, then stopped. The forests that had stood for millions of years could no longer grow. Leaves withered. Young plants failed to sprout. Flowers stopped blooming. The lush green world that had sustained countless species began to fade. At first, herbivores simply had to search farther for food, but every day there was less to find. The giant plant eaters that once roamed endless forests now wandered through landscapes, growing increasingly barren. Many had enormous bodies that required hundreds of kilograms of vegetation every single day. Their size, once their greatest advantage, became a terrible burden. Some grew weaker with each passing week. Others abandoned traditional migration routes in desperate searches for food that no longer existed. And when the herbivores began to disappear, the predators soon followed. The mighty hunters that had ruled the land for millions of years found themselves chasing fewer and fewer prey. Some fought one another over scarce meals. Others starved. Nature's balance, perfected over millions of years, was collapsing one link at a time. But the disaster did not end on land. The oceans, which covered most of the planet, were changing too. Tiny microscopic organisms, known as phytoplankton, also rely on sunlight. Invisible to the naked eye, they form the base of marine food webs. As sunlight vanished, their populations crashed. Small marine animals that fed on them began to die. Larger fish struggled to survive. Marine reptiles, sharks, and countless other creatures suddenly found themselves in oceans that could no longer sustain them. Even the seas were growing quiet. Then came the cold. With so little sunlight reaching the Earth's surface, global temperatures began to fall. Scientists estimate that average temperatures dropped dramatically over a relatively short period. A planet that had been warm and humid for millions of years was suddenly thrust into an unfamiliar climate. Many species simply could not adapt quickly enough. Some sought shelter. Some migrated. Most had nowhere to go. The Earth they had evolved to survive no longer existed. Imagine walking through one of those ancient forests months after the impact. The towering trees still stand, but many are dying. The familiar calls of giant herbivores are gone. The thunder of massive footsteps has faded. Predators no longer roar across the valleys. The air is still. The rivers flow, but fewer creatures come to drink. The skies that once carried enormous pterosaurs now seem strangely empty. This is when the Earth went quiet. Not in a single day. Not because every animal died at once, but because each passing season claimed another voice, another species, another chapter in the history of life. Some nests would never hatch. Some migrations would never happen again. Some calls would echo through the forests for the very last time. And then, never again. Scientists estimate that around 75% of all species on Earth disappeared during the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event. Nearly all of the great non-avian dinosaurs, the giants that had ruled the planet for more than 160 million years, were gone. Many marine reptiles vanished forever. Countless species of plants, insects, and microscopic organisms also disappeared. It was one of the greatest mass extinctions in Earth's history. Yet, astonishingly, it wasn't the greatest. Millions of years earlier, another catastrophe, the Permian-Triassic extinction event, had wiped out an even larger share of life. Earth had endured unimaginable loss before, and somehow, it endured again. Because while the giants were disappearing, hidden beneath fallen logs, inside underground burrows, along the banks of quiet rivers, a handful of small survivors were living through the darkness. They weren't the strongest, they weren't the fastest, and they certainly weren't the rulers of the world. But they possessed something far more valuable, the ability to endure. While the age of giants was ending, the age of survivors was quietly beginning. For millions of years, the giants had ruled the earth. They towered over forests. They dominated rivers. They patrolled the skies. And then, they were gone. If you had walked across the planet in the years following the asteroid impact, you would have entered a world unlike any that had existed before. The roaring forests had become strangely still. The great herds had vanished. The skies that once belonged to giant pterosaurs were now almost empty. The rulers of the earth had disappeared, but life itself had not. In the middle of one of the greatest catastrophes our planet has ever known, a remarkable story was quietly unfolding. Some species survived, not because they were stronger, not because they were larger, but because they were better suited to a world that had suddenly become harsh, cold, and unpredictable. Take the crocodiles, for example. At first glance, it seems almost impossible that they outlived the dinosaurs. They had shared rivers and wetlands with them for millions of years. Yet when the extinction ended, crocodilians were still here. Scientists believe one reason is their extraordinary metabolism. Unlike large dinosaurs, crocodiles can survive for long periods without eating. When food became scarce after the asteroid impact, they were able to conserve energy and wait. Their semi-aquatic lifestyle also helped. Rivers, lakes, and wetlands often recovered more quickly than dry land, providing shelter and a more stable food supply during the years of environmental chaos. Turtles were another unlikely survivor. Protected by their shells and capable of living in freshwater environments, many turtle species managed to endure conditions that proved fatal for countless other animals. Then there were the birds. It may sound surprising, but birds are, in fact, the only dinosaurs still alive today. The pigeons in our cities, the eagles soaring over mountains, the sparrows outside your window. They are all descendants of a small group of feathered dinosaurs that survived the catastrophe 66 million years ago. Every birdsong you hear today is, in a way, an echo of the age of dinosaurs. But perhaps the most important survivors were creatures that hardly anyone would have noticed before the impact. Small mammals. While giant dinosaurs dominated the landscape, these early mammals lived quiet lives in the shadows. Many were no larger than a mouse. They hunted insects at night, sheltered inside burrows, nested beneath fallen trees. They were not impressive. They were not powerful. Yet those very characteristics became their greatest advantage. Burrows shielded them from extreme temperatures. Their small bodies required far less food than the enormous dinosaurs. Many could eat almost anything: seeds, insects, roots, or whatever remained available. In a world where survival depended on flexibility, they were perfectly equipped. Generation after generation, they endured. As the dust slowly settled and sunlight returned, the earth began a long recovery. Plants gradually reclaimed the barren landscape. Forests started growing again. Insects multiplied. Rivers became rich with life once more. The silence that had settled over the planet slowly began to lift, but something had changed forever. The giants never returned. The ecosystems that emerged were different from the ones that had existed before the impact. Nature was not rebuilding the old world. It was creating a new one. And the mammals that had once hidden beneath the feet of dinosaurs suddenly found themselves living on a planet with opportunities they had never known. Without giant predators dominating every habitat, they began to explore new environments. Some adapted to life in the trees. Others became skilled runners across open landscapes. Some returned to the oceans, eventually giving rise to whales and dolphins. Others developed powerful claws for digging or wings for gliding through forests. Over millions of years, evolution accelerated. Species diversified. Body sizes increased. New ecological roles appeared. It was one of the greatest biological recoveries in Earth's history. Yet the most extraordinary chapter was still millions of years away. Among those early mammals was a small branch of life that spent much of its time in the trees. They developed forward-facing eyes that improved depth perception, flexible hands capable of grasping branches, large brains relative to their body size. These were the earliest primates. They had no idea they represented the beginning of a journey that would eventually lead to creatures capable of building civilizations, exploring space, and uncovering the story of the asteroid that made their existence possible. Think about that for a moment. If the asteroid had missed the Earth, the dinosaurs may have continued ruling the planet for millions of years. The mammals might never have risen to prominence. Human beings, as we know them, may never have existed. Our own story is deeply connected to one of Earth's darkest days. The catastrophe that ended one age became the foundation of another. But one question still remained. How do we know any of this? No human witnessed the impact. No dinosaur left behind a written record. For centuries, the disappearance of the dinosaurs remained one of science's greatest mysteries. It would take curious minds, remarkable discoveries, and a hidden scar beneath the surface of the Earth to finally reveal what happened on that unforgettable day. And that discovery would completely change our understanding of life's history. For thousands of years, no one knew what had happened. Long before modern science, people occasionally uncovered enormous fossilized bones buried beneath the Earth. Some believed they belonged to dragons. Others imagined they were the remains of mythical giants. No one could have guessed that these bones belonged to animals that had ruled our planet for more than 160 million years. Even after scientists recognized dinosaurs as real creatures in the 19th century, one mystery remained unsolved. Why did they disappear? Some believed the Earth had slowly cooled. Others suggested widespread volcanic eruptions. Some thought diseases had swept through dinosaur populations, while others argued that mammals had simply outcompeted them. For decades, there were theories, but there was very little evidence. Then, in the late 1970s, a father and son team made a discovery that changed everything. Physicist Luis Alvarez and geologist Walter Alvarez were studying a thin layer of rock in Italy that marked the boundary between the age of dinosaurs and the world that followed. The layer was incredibly thin, yet it contained something extraordinary, an unusually high concentration of the element iridium. Iridium is extremely rare in Earth's crust, but relatively common in asteroids. The question was unavoidable. How had so much iridium become concentrated all around the world at exactly the same point in Earth's history? The answer was as astonishing as it was controversial: an asteroid. At first, many scientists were skeptical. The idea seemed almost unbelievable. Could a single impact really transform an entire planet? Could one collision truly wipe out nearly 75% of all species on Earth? As more evidence emerged, the case grew stronger. The same iridium-rich layer was discovered on multiple continents. Scientists found tiny grains of shocked quartz, minerals that can form only under the immense pressures created by nuclear explosions or asteroid impacts. They discovered microscopic glass beads created when molten rock was blasted into the atmosphere and cooled before falling back to Earth. Piece by piece, the evidence pointed to one conclusion: the Earth had suffered an impact unlike anything in recorded human history. But one crucial piece of the puzzle was still missing. Where was the crater? If an asteroid that large had struck Earth, it should have left behind an enormous scar. For years, scientists searched. Then, beneath the forests and coastline of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, they found it. Hidden beneath layers of younger rock lay the remains of a colossal impact crater, nearly 200 kilometers, or 120 miles, wide. Today, it is known as the Chicxulub crater, The scar had been there all along, buried, silent, waiting to be discovered. It was the missing piece that confirmed one of the greatest scientific detective stories ever solved. Today, satellites can map its outline. Drilling projects have recovered rocks from deep within the crater, revealing minerals that were melted, shattered, and transformed on the very day the asteroid struck. Every layer of evidence tells the same story. 66 million years ago, our planet experienced one of the most devastating days in its history. Yet this story is not only about destruction, it is also about resilience. Life did not surrender. It adapted. From tiny mammals hiding in burrows came the ancestors of elephants, whales, bats, and primates. From the small feathered dinosaurs that survived came every bird that fills our skies today. The world that emerged after the impact was different. New forests spread across the continents. New ecosystems formed. New opportunities appeared. Life began writing a new chapter. And eventually, after tens of millions of years, one species evolved with the ability to ask questions about its own origins. Us. Think about that the next time you hear birds singing at dawn. Their ancestors survived the greatest catastrophe since the end of the dinosaurs. Think about the forests that surround us. They are descendants of ecosystems that recovered from global darkness. Think about yourself. Your existence is connected to an asteroid that struck the Earth 66 million years ago. Had that asteroid passed harmlessly through space, the age of dinosaurs might have continued for millions of years. The mammals would likely have remained small. Human beings may never have evolved. History would have taken an entirely different path. It is a humbling thought. The greatest disaster in the history of the dinosaurs became the opportunity that allowed our own story to begin. The Earth did not become silent forever. The silence was temporary. It was the quiet pause between two extraordinary chapters in the history of life. One world ended, another began, and every living creature alive today carries, in one way or another, the legacy of that single day. So when we speak of the extinction of the dinosaurs, we are not simply telling the story of how a world ended. We are telling the story of how our world began. The Earth went quiet, but from that silence came us. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through Earth's deepest past, subscribe to Echoes of Extinction. In our next episode, we'll uncover another forgotten chapter from the history of life, one where an even greater catastrophe, known as the Great Dying, nearly erased life itself. Until then, remember, every fossil has a story, and every extinction leaves an echo.